Students, welcome to class 2 political science class. Today I will continue lesson 7 organs of government, the executive. Today I will discuss day 4 topic, that's the real executive powers and functions. Students, this covers your pages from 285 till 300. The objectives of the lesson are divided into 6 days, and as already I told you, today I will be discussing day 4 topic. The day 4 topic is the real executive powers and functions. The objectives of the day are: first I will discuss the introduction of the topic, then I will talk about the organization of the Union Council of Ministers, then I will discuss powers and functions of the Union Council of Ministers, then functions and position of Prime Minister of India, and finally I will talk about change in the role of Prime Minister in the coalition era. Already I have told you it covers your pages from 285 till 300. Now before discussion of today's topic, I would like to have a PK testing of yesterday's topic. Yesterday's topic was powers and functions of the Union Council of Ministers. On the basis of this topic, my first question is, why does the President in India act on aid and advice of the Prime Minister and his Council of Ministers? This is my first question, and this makes the president a nominal head. Students, you must know it that according to constitution, the president is to act on the aid and advice of Prime Minister and his Council of Ministers. That's why the president does so, because it is given in the constitution. The second question is, of which house of the Union Legislature the Prime Minister must be a member? So, as we know, there are two houses in the Union Legislature. The lower house is Lok Sabha and the upper house is Rajya Sabha. So, students, there is no compulsion to which house the Prime Minister must be member. He can belong to any house, but he must be leader of majority party in the Lok Sabha. That's clear. He should be member of the leader of the party in the Lok Sabha. Like I give you an example, when Dr. Manmohan Singh became the Prime Minister of India, he was not member of Lok Sabha. He was member of Rajya Sabha. But the party which was in Lok Sabha, in majority, he was leader of that party. The next question is, name the body that elects the President of India. The body is called the Electoral College, and it has many members. All the elected MLAs and MPs are the members of Electoral College. The next question is, name the Prime Minister who remained in office for the shortest term, and what was the term? Come on, it's a very surprising question that the Prime Minister of India who was there in office for the shortest term. You know, it is Mr. Atal Bihari Vajpayee. He acted as the Prime Minister of India and the term was just 13 days. He could not prove the majority, so he came out of the office. Next question is, name the Chief Justice of India who has worked as the acting President of India. Now, in routine circumstances, there is head of the state known as the President of India, and in case he is not on his seat, then the constitution provides the Vice President will act as the President of India. But there can be situation when both are not available, and it happened once. Then in this situation, the constitution provides the Chief Justice of India will act as the President of India, and it was Justice Hidayatullah who worked as the Chief President of India. The next question is, whom can a criminal make a mercy petition against the judgment of the Supreme Court of India in case of capital punishment? You know, the capital punishment is the death sentence, and whom can a criminal make mercy petition, because capital punishment is given by the Supreme Court. Though above Supreme Court there is no court, that's the last court, apex court. Here the answer is the President of India. A criminal can make mercy petition to the President of India. Now my PK testing is over. I will discuss the topic related key terms with you. The first key term is the oath of office. Prior to assuming the respective offices, the Prime Minister and his Council of Ministers take the oaths of office. The oath is administered to them by the President of India. The next key term is constituency allowance. It is the allowance provided to particular honorary posts like Prime Minister, Ministers, etc. for their daily expenditures. In their work process, they have to incur lot of expenditure on account of moving from one place to another and also speaking with various important heads, government officers in their constituencies. On such account, amount paid is known as the constituency allowance because when they are moving inside their constituency means from which area they are winners, so they have to work in that area. For work process, they need the allowances so that the work is done well. Next is Niti Aayog. The Niti Aayog, formed in 2015, is a public policy think tank of the Government of India established with the aim to achieve sustainable developmental goals with the involvement of state governments of India in the economic policy making process. The Niti Aayog Council comprises of all the state chief ministers along with the chief ministers of Delhi and Puducherry, lieutenant governors of all the union territories. The Prime Minister is the chairman of Niti Aayog. Yes, this Niti Aayog was established in 2015 instead of Planning Commission. So this is a public policy think tank. The purpose of Niti Aayog is to achieve sustainable developmental goals with involvement of the state governments with the government of India. At present, the chairman of the Niti Aayog is Mr. Modi because Prime Minister is always the chairman of Niti Aayog and the members are all the state chief ministers and the lieutenant governors of all the union territories. And there are two union territories which have their own chief ministers. These are Delhi and Puducherry. So these chief ministers are also members of Niti Aayog. Next is coalition era. The example is the first successful coalition government in India which completed the whole 5-year term was the Bharatiya Janata Party led National Democratic Alliance with Atal Bihari Vajpayee as Prime Minister from 1999 to 2004. A coalition is a group formed when two or more people, states, political parties, etc., agree to work together temporarily in a partnership to have achieved a common goal. So you see, normally we talk about coalition related to the political parties. When more than one party they combine together and they form the government, it is called the coalition government. And nowadays this is going on in India and we call it a coalition era. Next is NDA. The full form of NDA is National Democratic Alliance. So, NDA is an Indian political alliance made up of right-wing political parties and led by the Bharatiya Janata Party. It was founded in 1998 and currently controls the Indian Union government as well as the government of 18 Indian states. So you see, NDA is a coalition government. So in this coalition, the main leading party is the Bharatiya Janata Party. It was founded in 1998. Today, it is ruling over the Union Parliament and it is also in majority in the 18 Indian states. Out of total 28 states, it is working in 18 states of India. Next is UPA. UPA means United Progressive Alliance. It is a coalition of central left-wing political parties in India formed after 2004 general elections. The largest member party of UPA is the Indian National Congress, whose president Sonia Gandhi is the chairperson of the UPA. As we have seen NDA chairperson is now Narendra Modi and UPA chairperson is Sonia Gandhi. So UPA is mainly led by the Congress party and NDA is mainly led by the Bharatiya Janata party. Now I am going to begin today's topic, that's the real executive powers and functions. The Constitution of India provides for a parliamentary system which divides the executive into two parts. The first is the nominal executive and the second is the real executive. The President is bound by the advice of the Council of Ministers. He can ask the Council of Ministers to reconsider an advice only one time, but he can't refuse to accept the reconsidered advice. This makes the Prime Minister, with his Council of Ministers, the real executive, and the President, a nominal executive in India. Yes, students, you see, the nominal executive is president and the real executive is prime minister and his council of ministers. So, how prime minister and council of ministers is real executive? Because we are living in democratic state, and whatever resolution or bill is passed in the legislature, that is to be approved by the president. No doubt president has power to send it back for reconsideration, but this power he can't use it again and again. This can be used only for one time. If it comes second time, either with changes or without changes, the president is to accept the advice. So this thing makes the president a nominal executive and prime minister a real executive. Now I will discuss the organization of Union Council of Ministers. According to Constitution, after the general elections to the Lok Sabha, the President appoints the leader of the majority party or single largest party in Lok Sabha as the Prime Minister, and other ministers shall be appointed by the President upon the advice of Prime Minister. Before a minister enters upon his office, the President shall administer to him the oath of office. As India has a parliamentary democratic structure, so executive is a part of legislature. A minister who is not a member of either house of parliament shall get its membership within a period of 6 months. Otherwise, at the expiry of that period, he shall cease to be a minister. So this is the condition of parliamentary democratic structure. Means the executive, that's the ministers, must be part of legislature, that's a parliament. If any minister is not member of parliament, maybe any house, he can't continue to be as minister for more than 6 months. And this is totally opposite in USA. USA has presidential democratic structure. There, the executive and legislature are totally different. The executive, that's ministers and president, they cannot be member of the legislature. But here in India, it's totally opposite. The number of ministers can't be more than 15% of the total strength of Lok Sabha, that's 50 to 75 ministers. I think so. The total strength of Lok Sabha is 545 members, and 15% of 545 is 50 to 75. So this much ministers can be in the this ruling party, ministers, executive body. The number of cabinet ministers is between 15 to 20. You know that the core group is of cabinet ministers. Out of 50 to 75 ministers, the number of cabinet ministers cannot be more than 15 to 20. They constitute the powerful policy making and decision making part of the Council of Ministers. They have regular meetings under the chairmanship of the Prime Minister. So the cabinet ministers are in regular touch with the Prime Minister because they are to work on the policy making and decision making part of the government. So their work is very, very important for running the government, and the chairman of this cabinet is the prime minister. So their meetings are always under the chairmanship of the prime minister. The ministers of state either hold an independent charge of the small departments or are attached to the cabinet ministers. They attend the cabinet meetings only when specially asked by the Prime Minister or by a cabinet to do so. The second category of ministers is ministers of state. The cabinet ministers are just 15 to 20 and they hold very important portfolios. The next category of ministers is ministers of state. Now you see, these ministers of state are not given the big departments, responsible departments. They are given small departments or they are attached to the cabinet ministers, means either this or that. Okay, and their meetings of cabinet, they can't attend every meeting. They attend cabinet meetings only when they are called by the Prime Minister to attend the meetings. The third category of ministers is deputy ministers, and they are helping ministers to the cabinet ministers of state. They never hold an independent charge of any department. The present Council of Ministers has no deputy minister as its member. The parliamentary secretary is a civil servant who is appointed entirely at the discretion of the Prime Minister, who will decide when and who should be appointed as parliamentary secretary. You know, parliamentary secretaries are the civil servants. So, who will be there in this department? That's all the choice of Prime Minister. And nowadays, there is no deputy minister because the role of deputy ministers is just a helping ministers. They are never given any department on their own. The main function of parliamentary secretaries is to help the minister in parliament during the question hour. They provide the concerned data to the ministers and help in saving the government. So the both of them, parliamentary secretaries and deputy ministers, they function to provide the concerned data to be replied by the ministers in the question hour timing. So they help in saving the government by providing the complete data to the concerned department minister. Now, the next example is in 2002, Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee decided to have a deputy prime minister in his ministry. He appointed Shri L.K. Advani as deputy prime minister in his government. So it was the decision of Shri Atal Bihari Vajpayee, who was a prime minister that time, to have a deputy prime minister. Otherwise, our constitution is not providing that there is a compulsion to have a deputy prime minister. It is a sweet will of the prime minister to have or not to have a deputy prime minister in his council of ministers. The prime minister can recommend the president for the dismissal of any minister, and the president always acts upon his advice. So you see, this point also makes the president a nominal head. He is nominal executive because he is to act on the advice of Prime Minister. So if Prime Minister finds any minister is not working according to the constitution or according to his demands or public demands, just to save his government, the Prime Minister can ask the President to change any minister. The resignation of the Prime Minister means the resignation of the entire Council of Ministers. Thus, the tenure of the ministry or a minister is not fixed. So, you see, constitutionally, no doubt, the tenure of minister or prime minister is not fixed, but still we can tell that their tenure is according to the tenure of Lok Sabha because they are taken from the Lok Sabha. Executive is a part of a legislature. So, however, the maximum period for which a ministry can remain in office is 5 years. That's for the term of Lok Sabha. The Constitution declares that the salaries and allowances of the ministers shall be determined by the Parliament by law. So, you see here, the salaries and allowances of ministers are determined by the Parliament, and they themselves are sitting in the Parliament as executive. So this is only department who decides their own salaries. Otherwise, the salaries are never decided by the person who is going to get it. Besides this, each minister gets a constituency allowance. Now, I will discuss the powers and functions of the Union Council of Ministers. The powers and functions of the cabinet in India can be divided into following three categories. Number 1, executive powers, number 2, legislative powers, and number 3, financial powers. First, I will talk about the executive powers. I will start it with an example. The Niti Aayog works in close collaboration with the cabinet, and the Prime Minister is the chairman of Niti Aayog. This I have already discussed while talking about the key terms. The Council of Ministers is the real executive. The executive powers vested by the Constitution in the President of India are really the powers of the Council of Ministers. The cabinet formulates the foreign policy as well as the domestic policy deemed fit for the development of the country. The exercise of emergency powers by the president is always done in accordance with the advice of the Council of Ministers. The president can declare a national emergency only under the written advice of the cabinet. So you see, these are the executive powers of the president. But here, in use of every power, we have seen there is compulsion to the president that he is to follow the advice of the Council of Ministers. Maybe it's the appointment of anyone, maybe it's a like domestic policy, maybe it's a foreign policy, maybe it's an emergency power or anything. The president is to act on aid and advice of the Prime Minister and his Council of Ministers. Now, the next example is the president makes all higher appointments. So, which are the appointments? Like governors of the states, ambassadors, judges of the Supreme Court and High Courts, military commanders, members of the Union Public Service Commission, Election Commission, Niti Aayog, etc. So, these all appointments are made by the President of India. But we know that he is only a nominal executive. So, who is the real executive? That's the Prime Minister and his Council of Ministers. So, President makes all these appointments in accordance with the wishes of the Cabinet. Thus, the Council of Ministers exercises all real executive powers. In its working, the President is dominated by the Prime Minister and the Cabinet. The President works under the direction, supervision, control, and leadership of the Prime Minister. The reason is we are living in parliamentary democratic structure. But in US there is a presidential democratic structure. That's why there is a difference. The president in US is the real executive, but in India, Prime Minister is the real executive. Now I will discuss the legislative powers. The example is Prime Minister Vajpayee lost the no confidence motion by a margin of one vote. That's 269 were in his favor and 270 were against him in April 1999. Means he lost by just one vote and vote of no confidence was passed. The most recent no confidence motion was against Narendra Modi government and accepted by the speaker but defeated by 325 to 115 votes. So you see here, see the difference in the margin. 325 were in his favor and 115 votes were against him. So it means that vote of no confidence could not be passed, the government could not be dissolved. So this is the legislative power of the legislature. If the Lok Sabha either passes a bill not supported by the Council of Ministers or rejects a bill supported by the Council of Ministers, it is taken to be a vote of no confidence against the ministry and the entire Council of Ministers resign. While doing so, the Prime Minister can advise the President to dissolve the Lok Sabha and President always accepts such advice. Now you see in this point also, then in Lok Sabha, no doubt the bills are introduced. But if it is a government bill, it must pass because government is having majority in the Lok Sabha. And The private members bill can never pass because private members bill means opposition members anyone's bill. So opposition is not in majority, how can it pass? But if suppose government bill doesn't pass or private members bill passes, then what is the indication? It indicates that the government has lost the majority. It is indirectly a vote of no confidence. Then, in such a situation, the government is dissolved, and the prime minister can advise the president to dissolve the Lok Sabha also, and the president is to act on the advice of the prime minister. A bill not supported by the Council of Ministers cannot get passed in the Parliament because it doesn't enjoy the support of majority in the Parliament. Next is financial powers. The example is every year the budget is introduced in the Lok Sabha by the finance minister. So you see in this picture, finance minister Nirmala Sitaraman is going to Lok Sabha with the budget in her hand. The budget is prepared by the cabinet. It lays down the financial policy of the government. Constitutionally, the Prime Minister is the custodian of the national finances and exercises all the financial powers. However, in practice, the cabinet plays a leading role in this sphere also. The budget is prepared by the cabinet and money bills can be introduced in the Lok Sabha only by the ministers. Normally, the cabinet is in position to get its wishes accepted by the parliament. So, money bill or financial bill, it is the finance of the nation which comes in this bill, and the mainly the work is done behind is cabinet by the cabinet ministers. So, cabinet ministers play very important role in the financial powers also. The next is position of the Council of Ministers. The executive, the legislative, financial, and emergency powers of the president are really exercised by the Council of Ministers. This has already been told you that as the president is the nominal head and the prime minister and his council of ministers are the real head. So obviously all the executive, legislative, financial and emergency powers of the president are in real sense used by the Prime Minister and his Council of Ministers. Within the Council of Ministers, the Cabinet is the most powerful body and in reality it is the central institution which enjoys all these powers. So there are three categories of ministers in Council of Ministers and the core group is of the Cabinet ministers. So Cabinet is the most powerful body. It is a center of gravity and the most powerful institution of the Indian political system. Now I will talk about the Prime Minister of India. The office of the Prime Minister is the most powerful office in the Indian political system because he is the head of the Council of Ministers. So obviously, Prime Minister is the most powerful person in India. If the cabinet is the strongest institution, the Prime Minister is the strongest person in the cabinet. The Prime Minister is the head of the government of India and is the real custodian of all executive authority. Whenever a party gets a clear majority in the Lok Sabha elections, the president plays little role as he appoints the leader of such party or a coalition group as the prime minister. So normally we see that president appoints the prime minister, but whom he appoints, he doesn't have any choice. He always is to appoint the leader of the majority party in the Lok Sabha. However, in case no party gets a majority and some parties are even unable to elect a common candidate as their leader, the president can play a real role in the appointment of the prime minister. Only in this situation the president can use his own discretion. The example is in June 1991 when Mr. P.V. Narasimha Rao and in June 1996 Mr. H.D. Devagowda became prime ministers, and at that time of their appointments They were not members of parliament, either Lok Sabha or Rajya Sabha. Later on, in 1991, Prime Minister Narasimha Rao got elected to the Lok Sabha, while in 1997, Mr. Devegowda got elected to the Rajya Sabha. As already I have told you that the Prime Minister must be leader of majority party in the Lok Sabha, but it's not compulsory that he himself should also be the member of the Lok Sabha. He can be member of either house, either Lok Sabha or Rajya Sabha. The Constitution provides that any person who is not a member of either House of Parliament can become a minister and that he can remain so for 6 months, within which he has to secure membership of either House. This rule also applies to the Prime Minister. As I have given you examples of H.D. Devegowda and Narasimha Rao, they became the members of legislature, means parliament, within 6 months. When they were appointed the Prime Ministers, they were not members of the Union Parliament. So the Prime Minister holds office according to the pleasure of the President, which really means so long as he enjoys the confidence of the Lok Sabha with the majority support, Lok Sabha can pass a vote of no confidence against him, and in such a case, the Prime Minister has to submit his resignation to the President. So, this is the only situation when Prime Minister is to give resignation when a vote of no confidence is passed against him. And if his party is in majority, he himself can get any minister changed from the President. Now, I will discuss the functions of the Prime Minister of India. As the head of the government, leader of the Council of Ministers, leader of the majority party in Parliament, the Prime Minister exercises a very large amount of powers in the Indian political system. The office of the Prime Minister is the most important and powerful office in the Indian political system. The powers and functions of the Prime Minister are given as: after the appointment of Prime Minister, the President appoints all the ministers on the advice of Prime Minister. The Prime Minister decides who shall be the Cabinet Minister or Minister of State or a Deputy Minister. Yes, students, this I have already told you in the beginning of the lecture that out of 545 total members in the Lok Sabha, 15% should be the ministers. Now, in this 15%, there are three categories of ministers, that's cabinet ministers, ministers of state, and deputy ministers. This all depends on the choice of prime minister who will be the cabinet minister or who will be the deputy minister or who will be the ministers of state. And this time in Modi's government there is no deputy minister. The Prime Minister allocates the portfolios to his ministers. The Prime Minister has the power to shuffle and reshuffle his ministry at any time if, in his judgment, it is required for bringing effectiveness and discipline in the administration. This thing also is decided by the Prime Minister. Now you see, recently on 7 July 2021, Modi government made a big shuffling and changes in his ministry. So it is Prime Minister's choice and he get it done through the President. The Prime Minister, being the leader of the cabinet, presides over its meetings and decides all the matters. All the meetings of cabinet are the chairperson is the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister is the main channel of communication between the President and the Cabinet. The Prime Minister keeps the President informed of all the affairs of the government. This can't be revealed by any other minister to the President. So, whatever is decided in the Cabinet meetings, it is the responsibility of the Prime Minister to inform to the President because President is the head of the state. The Prime Minister, as the leader of the Lok Sabha, is also the leader of the Parliament. It is he who decides, in consultation with the Speaker of Lok Sabha, the complete agenda of the House. Students, during the session of the Parliament, the agenda of the house is fixed. So, what will be the agenda of the house? That's decided by the speaker in consultation with the prime minister. The prime minister always plays a key role in determining the foreign policy of the country and India's relations with other countries. Now, it is the prime minister who decides about the external affairs of India. So, what type of foreign policy means what type of India's relations will have with other countries? This is to be decided by the prime minister. Besides being the leader of his party and the Lok Sabha, the Prime Minister is also the leader of the nation and plays leadership role both in times of peace and war. Now I will talk about the position of the Prime Minister. The process of formation of a ministry begins when the President appoints the Prime Minister. So this I have already told you. When the elections are over, the leader of majority party in the Lok Sabha becomes the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister gets his appointment by virtue of being the leader of the majority party in the Lok Sabha and not really by the act of President. So you see here the President has no choice. It's not President who is doing his decision. It's this that the leader of the majority party becomes a Prime Minister. The Prime Minister selects his ministers and presides over the meetings of the cabinet. So here you see who is more powerful, who is the real executive. It's the Prime Minister because the ministers are selected by the Prime Minister and the meetings of cabinet are also presided over by the Prime Minister. The ministers really hold office during the tenure of the Prime Minister. Prime Minister is the real maker and controller of the Council of Ministers. The President always acts upon the advice of Prime Minister. The powers of the President are really the powers of the Prime Minister. So, constitutionally, according to Article 74 of the Constitution, the President is bound to act on the advice of Prime Minister and his Council of Ministers. If the President doesn't follow it, then the constitutionally the action can be taken against him. And you know what is action? He can be impeached. So, the most important power in India is of the Prime Minister. Undoubtedly, the Prime Minister of India enjoys the most powerful position in the whole political system. Yet, he can neither be a dictator nor can even behave like a dictator. A person can remain Prime Minister only so long as he follows democratic norms and values. So, this is also very important to understand. No doubt the Constitution provides very much powers to the Prime Minister. Real head is Prime Minister, but he can't act like a dictator. Can you tell me the reason? The reason is we are living in a democratic state because Prime Minister also knows that after 5 years the elections will take place and in the elections it's the public who is to elect him, who is to cast him vote. If the Prime Minister behaves like a dictator in the 5 years tenure, obviously in the next elections no one will like to cast him vote. Now, next is change in the role of Prime Minister in the coalition era. You know, these days, the time period which is going on, it is the period of coalition. Now, example is the coalition era in Indian politics had its real birth in 1989 when the Janata Dal led United Front coalition government of Prime Minister VP Singh came into office and remained in power for around 11 months. It was then replaced by the government of Prime Minister Chandrasekhar, who could remain in office for only 8 months. In 1991, no party got majority in the Lok Sabha. The Congress emerged as a single largest party, not majority party, and consequently formed a minority government. Obviously, it was not in majority, with its dependence on outside support from some parties. This government was led by Prime Minister Narasimha Rao, and he was in a position to complete his tenure of 5 years. So this was the coalition beginning when the support was from outside as the Congress was not in majority. In 1996 elections, BJP came to be the single largest party with 161 seats. You see, number is just 161, and to form the government, a party needs 273. So it was the largest party, not the majority party. And then BJP party formed coalition government under Prime Ministership of Atal Bihari Vajpayee and could last only for 13 days. Obviously, it was to be there because the party was having just 161 seats, and to form the government it needed 273 seats, so it could not prove majority. And after 13 days, Prime Minister Vajpayee left the Lok Sabha. He could not form his government. In 2004, the Congress-led UPA coalition government came to power with Dr. Manmohan Singh as Prime Minister. This government successfully completed its 5-year tenure. Yes, it started in 2004 and it was over in 2009. Again in 2009, Congress-led UPA came to power with Dr. Manmohan Singh as the Prime Minister. Second time Manmohan Singh became the Prime Minister because this time also UPA came with majority. After having remained a dominant party in the Indian constitutional system, the Congress found it difficult to maintain its strength and role in politics in the era of coalition politics. In fact, after the dawn of the era of coalition politics, the role and position of the Prime Minister came to be adversely affected. During this period, the office of the Prime Minister worked as a weak office. Obviously, it was to work as a weak office. The reason behind is that his party is never in majority. It is just the largest party. It is not majority party. And how they have collected majority? By assembling all other small parties. That is called the coalition group. Now, nowadays we have Narendra Modi as our Prime Minister, but now we can realize this is a strong coalition. So now I will discuss the strong position of the Prime Minister in contemporary times. In the Lok Sabha election held in 2014, the BJP was in a position to win a clear majority, and along with its NDA partners, it came to occupy 336 seats in the new house and under the leadership of Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi. In 2019, Shri Narendra Modi again became the Prime Minister for second time in succession with 353 seats with its coalition partners and BJP winning 303 seats individually. So, you see, I already told you to form the government, a party needs 273 seats. Now, here coalition government is having 353 seats, which is ruling these days. And out of it, the main party, that's BJP, is having 303 seats. It's a quite good majority. The BJP-led NDA government is free from pressures of coalition politics and regional parties. Prime Minister Narendra Modi has now started acting with double strength and is determined to secure the objective of making India a new and fully developed superpower in the world. Weakened position of Congress and all opposition parties has further given an additional strength to the office of Prime Minister. So weakened position of Congress, so we can see easily whenever there are elections in any state legislature, the Congress is not getting any good number of seats. So this is helping the BJP-led government NDA to work better at the center. All these factors have restored the traditional strength of the position and role of the office of Prime Minister in the Indian political system. Now, finally, I can say, despite the fact that the BJP currently enjoys a very strong position in the Indian political system, the Prime Minister has taken and has been still taking and implementing several big and strong policy decisions, but only through a democratic process. Prime Minister Modi has been following the democratic traditions of Indian political system. Obviously, he knows that he is in the democratic state and no doubt he is having a good majority strength with him, but still he is to work constitutionally according to the democratic structure. Now, students, this finishes my today's topic discussion. Now, I have discussed with you today the real executive, its introduction, organization of the Union Council of Ministers, powers and functions of the Union Council of Ministers, functions and position of Prime Minister of India, and finally, I talked about change in the role of Prime Minister in the coalition era. I have already told you this covers your pages from 285 till 300. Now the topic related questions are: analyze the position of Prime Minister in the Indian political system. Second, discuss the responsibility of the Union Council of Ministers before the Indian Parliament. Third, explain the method of appointment of Indian Prime Minister and other ministers of Union Council of Ministers. Fourth, write a note on the difference between Council of Ministers and the Cabinet. Fifth, discuss the changing role of the Indian Prime Minister in coalition era. Sixth, what are the powers of the Prime Minister of India? Seventh, what can be the maximum size of the Council of Ministers? Eighth, how is the Cabinet the most powerful part of the Council of Ministers? Ninth, what is the tenure of the Prime Minister of India? 10th, why can't the money bill be sent back by the President for reconsideration? So students, I hope you will do all the questions and make good notes on your notebook and watch the video again to get a better understanding of the topic. Next time I will continue the chapter. Till then, goodbye and thank you.